Yep.
And now we're live on YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
Hey.
All right.
So yeah, we found new ways for me to possibly break things.
I mean,
As one does.
listen. Are you really living if you're not just like trying to break the technology of multi-million and billion-dollar companies on the regular just by doing your job? I submit that you are not. Listen,
I would concur.
Right, you just gotta roll with it, right? Hello, everybody. So,
Exactly.
a small piece of business for those on the YouTube side. I promised you Monday that I would get you all more emotes. We've now filled all of the emote slots for members over on YouTube with hi and pog. I don't know if YouTube pogs. YouTube, tell me in the comments if you pog. Because if you
tell me what a pog is.
Pog is short for play of the game. It's also sort of a it's become a expression of joy and celebration. So we have a Matt Pog face. I will bring it up here on screen as Odin here so graciously demonstrated. This is Pog.
Nice.
And it is very much a Twitch culture thing. And I don't know. I don't know.
It's a YouTube culture thing.
Yeah, if it's a YouTube culture thing. By the way, Eddie, I love how the sun has conspired against us. That as we go live, it's just like, oh, hey, were you trying to do a thing? Nah, too bad. Get wrecked.
Luckily, I do have a blackout screen, so I can solve that real quick.
All right.
I know, it's kind of like it's throwing minor god rays down.
Yeah, it really is.
An extra camera flare.
Yeah. Oh, that is really cool. I might need to get something like that. I hadn't considered like something that attaches to the window.
Oh yeah, no, it's supposed to attach, but yeah, it's just basically it's like just a black kind of thing with a silver backside and has little suction cups. Just pop it right in there.
So Sirix, you're quite correct. Like most memes, Pog has descended from its original derivation, right, to like what it is now, right? So like GG used to be good game, and now GG is like its own thing, right? It kind of still means good game, but it's also drifted linguistically away. I swear I'm not making any of this up. You could do a PhD level paper on linguistic drift in meme analysis in online subcultures. Like there is so much here that so many people don't really take the time to think about. Oh, it's very interesting. Anyway,
you could do a separate corollary, or excuse me, a separate parallel. No, not even parallel. A separate one that just took how basically groups on the right pick a popular phrase and appropriate it to make it lose all of its original meaning.
Yes, that is and that's actually part of linguistic drift, right? Like.
Yeah. But that's intentional sabotage of a word versus the linguistic drift that happens as a niche term broadens out and then gets more popular usage and
Well,
it becomes the shibboleth.
Funny is it's not just online cultures because in America the word J originally just meant someone who walks across the street, but then it became something they wanted to criminalize, so government started using J as a pejorative, and that's where jaywalking comes from. Specifically is because they tried to make a pejorative out of a word that didn't mean that at all.
And the really funny part about that is that the reason that they tried to do that, and we could Jeff, this is a short, this could be a short, right, is the move from streets being shared pedestrian spaces to space being solely occupied by automobiles. Right? That the street was originally for people in carriages and to do business and to meet and to whatever, and then it eventually just became a thing for cars, right? And now it's bad to be a person in the street when before the street was just part of the town, right?
I could get Jason over from Not Just Bikes to talk about it.
Hey, that'd be really cool. That would be really cool. So, chat, we are today gathered here with our friend Eddie. Eddie's going to introduce himself when we actually start the recording. Don't worry. Eddie's great. He's written for credits in the past. He's been on Design Club in the past. We love when Eddie's here. It's going to be awesome.
And multi-published RPG author.
Right.
And author of one of my favorite EC episodes that we did a couple of years ago, which was The Litigious History of Dungeons & Dragons.
Which
Eddie, with his D&D amongst other background, was the one who did the research and writing for that episode.
Yeah.
And then Matt just threw in all the bad time travel jokes.
Yeah, great.
Matt's job is to take a script and to jazz it up.
Yeah.
Like that, and to put it into his word or into his tone, and to add in little quippy things that help make it fun along the way. That is actually part of his job.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about
hands instead of jazz hand, or was that Joe's hands? That sounds dirty when you say it.
The plan for today is we're going to talk about tariffs and how they're affecting the tabletop industry with an expert in the tabletop industry. So that's the plan for today. We're going to go for a little while. After that, if you're so inclined, I'll let you all know that Matt and I will be playing the Oblivion remaster here on Twitch when we're done. And tomorrow, if you are familiar at all with Claire Obscure, it is a Expedition 33. It is a game released by a French studio that is currently trending on Twitch above Oblivion. The Oblivion remaster came out, and an original IP game by a French studio that is a turn-based RPG is trending above it on Twitch, which is wild, right? That's just wild. So we're going to be playing it tomorrow. I'm super excited for that. So that's the rest of this week. That's what's coming up right after this. That's what we're doing today. Gents, am I missing anything?
I have one minor tangent, which is a literature recommendation before that.
Sure.
Because I've been enjoying it. And I will save the results of our last, was last week or 2 weeks ago that we talked about a la carte game development?
Last week was the backpack battles.
Oh, that's right.
Time is a soup, by the way. My memory is
not Steam. Unity sale happened, and I can tell you how much I spent.
Yeah, it's
Eddie, to catch you up, so I've been getting the itch to start building something again, but I'm not up for starting yet another game studio. So I'm reteaching myself Unity because I have not actually got my hands dirty in Unity for a long time. And one of the cool things about the Unity shop now is how much you can buy. To just put in like $40. A save system will save to Steam, iOS, everywhere in the cloud, backs up everything. So like it's done. $40, you plug it in, that's 3 weeks of engineer time. Like click, turn, insert. So Will and I did an episode where basically we just walked through the Unity store looking at the kinds of things you could buy.
Oh, wow.
And like Steam, Unity every once in a while does a sale. They're running a whole bunch of stuff at 50% off. And I ended up with a first-time coupon code of 25% off my entire purchase.
Oh, no.
It's effective.
I'll just, well, should I save it for on air or just finish now?
No, we can talk about it later. I did want to put in before I forget it. That should be your studio name. Yags, yet another game studio.
Yags. Nice.
I think I actually have I can do a funny name as a game studio.
Right, yeah, no, I mean,
that never happens.
Yeah, it's never happened, not even once. Definitely never.
But
yeah, okay, cool. So we're gonna go to black. Nobody panic. We will be right back with the beginning of the episode proper.
Wait, quick book recommendation.
Yes.
Currently, I believe it is trending as one of the #1 Audible books, which blows my mind. I'm listening to my first lit RPG style, basically real person gets put into a dungeon with game rules, book called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And it is way, 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 way better than it has any right to be in any conceivable universe.
Sure.
Feels a little bit like a John Scalzi's brother, for some reason, started writing about this. Okay. And it's fun. And I believe it is currently one of the #1 ranked Audible books.
Wow.
Full stop.
That's awesome.
And it's a series. So as a recommendation for something I never thought I would actually like, but am enjoying tremendously. And of course, it helps that the narrator is top notch, because that always helps.
Sean out here asking the real questions. If there's not treasure behind a waterfall, it's not a real open world adventure.
We have, they have hit so many RPG tropes in here and just made them like, the people are aware they're in a game dungeon. Like there ends up being a real interesting reason for this, and are like playing against expected tropes and or other things. It's fairly amazing. Anyway, so
all right.
Two thumbs up so far, 2/3 of the way through the first book.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent. We're going to black. We're going to start the episode. Be right back. Good time zone internet. Hello and welcome to Design Club, the only game design talk show on the internet that this week features a very special guest, Eddy Webb. Welcome on in, Eddy.
I would like a citation for that proclamation.
Yeah, okay. Well, hold on. You can answer. You're our citation. Eddy, you on any other design shows this week? If the answer is yes, I'll retract my...
design shows.
Okay, yeah. I'll
Last week I was on a different design show, but not this week.
This week,
this week you are exclusive to us. So welcome everybody to Design Club Live. I am Geoffrey Zatkin. I am the studio director of Extra Credits. Over here, as always, is Will, voice of the people, and our Twitch and now YouTube overlord for all of our live streaming. And we are joined by longtime friend of the show, longtime friend and successful RPG writer, designer, etc., Eddy Webb. Eddy, could you introduce yourself for a moment?
Yeah, I have been working in the tabletop RPG industry for, just doing some quick math, 24 years. Wow.
It adds up.
Yeah, next year, 25th, but it does add up. I've worked on over 200 books. Some big ones are Vampire the Masquerade. I've worked on Pugmire, which is my creator-owns game. I've worked on the WWE tabletop role-playing games. I mean, just all over the map in terms of the kinds of things I've worked on.
So you are what we would call a veteran game designer.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, right.
I figure once you're past your first 100, you know.
Right.
I was going to say
no. 100, you're good.
I was going to say once you're older than a significant portion of your intended player base, I feel like you've reached veteran status, or once you've been doing it longer than, you know.
Right.
So that's kind of cool.
My
so
career can drive easily. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Drink and drive. Not
at the same time. Don't do that. So today we've gathered everyone here today to talk about everyone's least favorite topic to talk about, which is currently tariffs. So it's no secret that tariffs have been something in the news recently. It's been something that's been going around on socials. It's been going around everywhere. And there's been a lot of what I would call sound bites from a lot of people about it. No one in particular, but just like that's been the trend, right? People are trying to compress their thoughts into a minute-long short or a 300-character Blue Sky post or whatever. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity to bring Eddy on and say more rather than less. Yeah. Because this is a big, complicated issue that a bunch of different people in the tabletop space and in the video gaming space are all going to be affected by. So we wanted to take a second.
Are not even going to, are already affected by.
That's true. Yeah, are already being affected. Yeah.
As a quick note, Eddy was also the one who wrote our episode a couple years ago called Extinction Level Event on Extra Credits. They talked about how the pandemic was specifically slamming the tabletop game industry just because of all of the increase in shipment rates and delays and everything that was happening during then. This is almost part 2 of that in some ways.
I agree.
Kind of, but I originally, I remember I had for a half second pitched the idea of maybe I could do a sequel as a 7-minute video, but then things have been moving so fast and they are so much more complicated than something like this is going to the only way you can really meaningfully talk about it, because it makes what happened in 2020 look like a dawdle.
And I think it's also really important to note that if you're watching this on YouTube for the first time, or you're not familiar with Design Club, that's one of the reasons that we do this format, is that it takes a really long time to get a script out and get animation done, but I can get Eddy and Geoff in a call for, an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we can sit down and talk about it. And that will be faster and more accurate, and we can say more because the news cycle won't have changed by the time the thing is released. So,
no, unless you're saying Nintendo launching the Switch 2.
I mean, yeah. Oh, poor Nintendo. By the way, it is the morning of April 24th. If you managed to get your pre-order, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. So happy for you. You and your pre-orders. Anyway, I'm not worried about it. It'll be fine. I'll get it eventually. So
actually, as part of the, not even ground rules, but background for this conversation, I think it's fair to say there's a lot about tariffs themselves and government policy that we won't be getting into.
Correct.
Like tariffs can fill books. And there are ways, actually, I'm going to lay this out and you guys can disagree if you want. There are ways to use tariffs to help do things like onshore production and other things.
Yes.
Sure.
But most of those require long-term planning to allow people to start acting to do what the tariff is intending to do.
Yes.
And so, and we can talk about why we might or might want to do that, but just setting up, there are worlds in which proper implementation of tariffs can enact government policy.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's fair to say for this conversation, how this particular set of tariffs rolled out in this particular environment, why it is so catastrophic. We're not saying that tariffs blanketly are a problem or whatnot, but this specific situation is a problem.
Yeah. So what we're specifically coming down to is this is talking about how the tariffs have been implemented and are therefore currently affecting the game industry in the same way that pandemic, when it came in and started affecting the industry, we weren't talking about other ones. It was this specific one that we are dealing with right now.
Yeah.
So just kind of framing for anybody watching that we are talking about the current way that things have been implemented and what that is doing to our much beloved industry.
Yeah.
Although tied it to the pandemic thing, that does the logical corollary is that not all pandemics are a problem. That some pandemics are.
Well, no, but the impact of that pandemic was unique in its right. All tariffs would impact the industry. This impact is unique. And that wasn't trying to up or downplay the last pandemic. Like the last pandemic was horrific. A lot of people died. Yeah, we're talking about we're in the magical world where all we're looking at is the economic impact, which is a terrible world to live in, but unfortunately a necessary one if we're going to get any analysis on the impact done, I think.
Just kind of setting that, because just for people watching, I wanted to get that out at the beginning, that's a good we're not going to go into 100-year history of tariffs or back to McKinley or any of the other things around it.
Yeah,
it's what's going on right now.
Right. Okay. So in order to understand what's going on right now, we need to talk about, to lay another piece of groundwork, which I think is really important, which is how does a tabletop, we'll use an RPG. We'll use an RPG starter box because that changes things a little bit. How does an RPG starter box for a brand new RPG? We're gonna make the Hecknomancer tabletop RPG. How does, real brief, how does that happen from we're done with the designing of the game, right? We have a finished design. We know what we want to be in the box.
We're going past all of the let's design a game into the we have designed the game and designed what we want to be the physical part of the game.
Yes.
Now what?
Right.
Yeah.
Because now what is a big next step?
That is a huge next step, right? So Eddy, fill us in as someone who's done this far more than either of us.
Well, I mean, it's a good point because we're also setting aside for the moment things like PDF versions of games or print-on-demand versions of games, because they're also not quite the same thing. So a box set is actually a really good example because you don't call up the box set publisher and say, hey, I want a box set of the thing. And they go, cool, you push a button and then box sets happen. It's nothing like that. Let's assume Hecknomancer has a rule book, character sheets, dice, and cardboard standees. That's just pretty simple, straightforward.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no. And I want a mat laminate, I want a battle mat put in there.
Fair enough. Or mat too.
And a map.
So odds are pretty good. You're going to get your dice manufactured one place. You're going to get your box, maybe your cardboard standees done a different place. Your laminate map a third place, and your book a fourth place.
Okay.
And they're all because the dice manufacturers have no clue how to make a book. The people making books don't know how to make cardboard into a box. They know how to make it into a book. They have very specialized machines as a general rule.
Okay.
And then once you find and source all those different, we'll say printer as a collective term, manufacturers, whatever. You find those different printers, you negotiate with them all the rates to make sure that it's something that adds up to a number that you can sell. You want to, the general industry wisdom is you want the cost to be about a fifth of what you eventually want it to sell for. So if you want that starter set to sell for $50, the cost of everything, including shipping and whatnot, should not exceed $10 per unit.
And really quick, for people who aren't familiar because this is that $10, and may seem like, wow, you're making 80%, or you're making a 5x off your one, but this is also to account for all the time it took to design the game and build the game. And this is also when a retailer buys the game, they want to buy it for, say, $30 and sell it, or $25 and sell it for $50.
Yeah. Well, actually, usually how it works.
Correct me,
for a moment. Usually, a distributor will buy that lot for, we'll call it $12, $13 a unit, and then the individual game store will buy it at another markup on top of that. That's somewhere around $20 a unit. I'm making numbers up here, but the point is like shipping goes to the distributor, it goes to the game store, and then the game store sells it, and they have to have enough room to not only make a profit but also to occasionally put on sale and still make at least some money. Because another piece is, as I mentioned, you get all these different manufacturers, printers going, then they all send that stuff to the distributor, who then usually by hand assembles each of those. So they usually get a line where it's like, take the box, put one book in, put one bag of dice in, put a set of standees in, put the map in, close it up, shrink wrap it, put it down, then you just go through the next one. And that also costs money to get all those assembly done.
And that is part of why the distributor takes as much of a cut as they do.
Right. Because they are literally manually assembling it. And that can't start until all of those pieces come in. They can't do it halfway. They've got to do it all at once. So if the dice are sitting in port while the other pieces are there, nothing's getting sold, nothing's moving. And on top of it, the distributor has warehousing costs. So if it's sitting there, you're paying for warehousing on top of that. So these costs do add up. So, I mean, yes, when I say you want to do 5x off of your manufacturing costs for price, I mean, it's not uncommon for something like that to make maybe $2 to $3 a profit per unit.
Right. Okay.
So that means that if you are lucky enough to sell, say, work for 2 years and then sell 100,000 copies of your game, you're making $200,000 to $300,000 for the multiple years of effort for everybody involved in putting it together.
Yeah.
And if that ends up being 5 or 6 people, that drops down pretty quickly.
Right, because it gets spread around. Even if it's not spread evenly, it still gets spread around. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of how it's a great brief high level overview, right? We don't need to go into dice tooling or anything like that. So
right.
But we will in a moment, because this is going to get to the interesting part.
Right. Okay. So the interesting part is that the biggest okay, let me back up. Because all of the core cost to print dictates your MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price. The base cost of goods sold runs through this multiplier to make sure that everyone along the way gets part of the cut, right? That the distributor gets the cut, that the game store gets the cut, that it can still go on sale, which is sort of a theoretical cut, right? You still need to have a segment that can be taken away and sort of given to the consumer, if that makes sense, as part of it. Which means that if the base cost of the goods sold goes up, it carries through this whole process and inflates not only the MSRP, but at the same. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, I think
the
you're back.
Streams are having a time.
Oh.
Okay, now we're where we should be.
Okay.
As a very brief internet hiccup. Okay, cool, great. We're back where we should be. Apologies to everyone. That was
live television.
It's an unavoidable part of doing it live. All right, let's continue.
So, as many of you know, last year we ran a Kickstarter, our very first one for Extra History, and we sold history calendars, which I should have. Mine is sitting behind my green screen.
Yeah,
they were really cool. And we're probably going to do another one again this year because the last one was great. We did a lot of planning, and for our calendar, we had our calendar. We also had a deluxe package on the Kickstarter that, in addition to the calendar, had digital art of the calendar, had phone wallpapers, had physical postcards, and had an exclusive pin that you could only get in that. Actually, here, which was Walpole sitting on a pen with it long enough that we could actually use it as a wall tack to hang the calendar, which was pretty cool. And so what that meant was, as we were sourcing this to figure out how much do we ask for on the Kickstarter, we had to know how much would each calendar cost, and for the deluxe pack, in addition to the digital goods, how much would the postcards cost and the pin cost. Something about production was, I'm looking at a huge spreadsheet here. The costs weren't flat. For example, if we ordered 500 calendars, our cost was X. If we could get it up to 1,500 calendars, the cost was literally half X. And if we could but from 1,500, the price point again wasn't linear. If we got it from 1,500 to 2,000, it actually dropped by 4 cents. Where if we could,
do you know why you get those price breaks?
Hit me.
I actually looked into this a while back. Particularly with printers, the big reason is because it costs the printer just as much money to turn on a machine as to turn off. So if they could turn on a machine and let it run, them doing 500 or 2,000 is a negligible difference to them.
Interesting.
But turning that off again and resetting it for another thing costs a lot of money for them.
Right, because you have to.
So that's why they're willing to give you more of a benefit for more units, because they get more money actually for less work.
Actually, I'm looking here at 1,000. It would cost going 1,000 to 1,500. It cost us, after that huge price break where it dropped, we saved 11 cents. From 1,500 to 2,000, we saved 4 cents. From 2,000 to 2,500, we actually then saved 7 cents. It was hitting that threshold. But even the 4 and the 7, et cetera, if you're selling thousands of a thing, it starts getting in. There were different thresholds for the postcards, getting them printed, and different thresholds for the pins.
Yep.
So I had a huge spreadsheet because we were looking at, if we can, sell this many deluxe packages, here's the profit we make. But if we can sell this many, we actually make, it wasn't a linear amount.
Yeah.
Right.
So people putting these together are also thinking of their print run sizes for things like the dice and the standees and the maps and the books, etc., because you might actually find a situation where ordering an extra 500 of them costs you equivalently the cost of ordering 30 more of them, and then suddenly you have an extra 470 of them that are there's weird math that goes into finding these price breaks and lining them all up with each piece of physical goods.
Yep.
But also, when we ordered our calendars and we got the first one sent to us, the group who sent it to us realized they'd given us a misquote, and basically it was for a less quality calendar than we'd asked for, and refused to honor the actual quote they'd given us. And one of our procurement people over at Nebula, our streamer service, who also does some merch, found us a new one who could do the actual thing for the price, but it was no longer in the US, because we'd initially chosen a US-based manufacturer for our calendar. And instead, they were going to jack the price up 60% to hit what we actually wanted. We found the original price, it's therefore the 60% less, from China, because the Chinese group was set up to do that, where none of the American ones were.
Yeah.
And this is because we started trying to go all on shore for this just to avoid weird shipping things. And it was cheaper to go to China and actually have them airship it over to us than it was to order from somewhere 30 miles away.
Yep.
And that, like, the problem was we'd started the Kickstarter. Like, we couldn't go jack up the price in the middle of this. The Kickstarter was going. If the calendar suddenly cost 60% more, our profit of this to help fund the studio is going to go down to that.
Right.
So this wasn't a thing where like, oh, we're going to go over to China. This was, holy crap, we found a printer that will save our Kickstarter because the initial group we did gave us a bum order and then refused to honor the terms that they did it on.
Right.
Like, so, some of these are weird circumstances, but like I wanted to bring that up as a thing that affected our studio.
Yeah. So let's pull this apart a bit, right? So obviously the reason that we're talking about this is that bit that things are being made outside the US. And Geoff, you correctly alluded that things are made less expensively outside the US. And I think
in some places.
Yeah, in some places. Not every good or service is cheaper outside the US. We should be clear about that. The reason that we're talking about this actually alludes to something that Eddy said, which is that the facilities and machinery and expertise to make many of the things that are involved in tabletop gaming are not to be found readily at the price that the companies are used to paying, or even close to it, 60% more here in the US, right?
It was a markup. Like that was...
I'll actually go a step further. We get into board games specifically. There are certain manufacturing needs that board games have that do not exist at all in the United States at any price.
Okay, so it exists in this spectrum. So all of these things are happening elsewhere in places where there is machinery, expertise, and labor, right? That is all unique, right? Either at the price that it is or merely its existence, right? And so it sounds like that's really common for this industry, right? That that the majority, in fact, I think every Kickstarter I've ever backed has said this will be manufactured in China and here is the lead time. And, it's become somewhat of a Kickstarter tradition even. And I'm only using Kickstarter here because Kickstarter involves additional transparency with customers, with purchasers, right? I don't see this for a thing that ends up at the shelf at my local game store. I see it for a thing I Kickstarted because the Kickstarter will update me, right?
If you go buy Candyland from Target, you don't know where the pieces in Candyland or Risk or Monopoly, et cetera, came from. Where on a Kickstarter, they will usually list it.
Right. And the Kickstarter will often tell you, all right, everything's done at the manufacturer. It's on the boat. Right? The on the boat posts on Kickstarter are like a tradition now. Right. And then like everyone celebrates when it makes it to customs, and then everyone grumbles when it sits in customs. Right. And then it makes it to a distributor here in the US and they distribute it to or in its final port. Right. Sometimes it all comes to the US and then goes elsewhere. Sometimes it goes straight from China to all of the different international distributors. It depends on how they have it set up.
And as a quick note, historically, China is currently the country that has set up the manufacturing infrastructure. But it has changed. There was a long time when everything used to say for electronics, for example, made in Taiwan.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
There's
or made in Japan.
One of the made in Japan. One of the parts of the globalization push was to basically, instead of having every country doing duplicate things, to basically start pushing specialties to certain countries. You couple countries do manufacturing. You couple countries do, mineral extraction. You couple countries do tech and software development. Like if you're talking about software development, there's a couple countries that you go to for software development. Like all of these things have become specialized because it was deemed inefficient for every country to do everything. Fast forward 60, 70, 80 years of that, and it has led to these kind of situations where you suddenly no longer have, for example, certain manufacturing capabilities in the US. But this would be true if you were a Canadian company or a Brazilian company or anything else. They also wouldn't have those expertise and machinery and tooling because, again, the world has and the way capitalism works, has pushed it off to make it into specific areas that do it very well.
Correct. And while this isn't the thrust of our argument, this does also apply to the other parts of gaming, right? To the video games industry, right? It is April 24th. Switch pre-orders have done their thing. There are very clearly not enough Switch 2s for all of the people who want them for a plethora of reasons, and it suffers the same problem. People are like, why couldn't you just make the Switch 2 in the US? Well, to start with, not all the raw materials that are needed to make a Switch 2 exist in the US. So that's a problem to start with, right? And this problem goes across many industries. We're here going to focus on tabletop gaming because that's what we have expertise in, and because I think it's a very good small
microcosm.
Yeah, microcosm, right? They are tabletop games are relatively simple products to manufacture. Obviously, the design is complex and playtesting and all of that, but the manufacturing is
it's not an iPhone.
Yeah, it's not an iPhone.
A BMW.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it has the same problems as many of them in the sense that an iPhone is made, a lot of the parts of that are made all over the world and then combined in one place before they're actually shipped out. A board game has the same logistical problems on a much more easily understood scale.
Yes.
So, I
by the way, some of that parts made in other places are by design. So, for example, a lot of U.S. defense contractors that assemble complex things like, say, a missile system or an airplane will have pieces of it built in as many states as they can, so that when they need funding, they can ask their state representatives. They're like, hey, well, if this funding gets stopped, you lose manufacturing in your state. They've purposefully spread it around so that when the procurement system comes again, they have all of the state senators saying, well, I don't want to lose these, manufacturing jobs in my state. And in some cases, the same for things like iPhone. The fact that they can say, pieces of this were made in 40 different countries, lets them also say, pieces of this were made in your country.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
And that has backfired in some ways, but it was also for a long time a good selling point.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I kind of interrupted.
No,
I sidetracked us, but for explanation. But
I think this
design club. What?
This is a good setup, right? Okay, so we've established that how games are made, that they are made in places around the world, because currently, in the way that the world works and is set up, they need to be, in order for that to be, up until this point, until the tariffs rolled in, a economically viable way to bring a product to consumers in a sustainable fashion for the companies making them. Is that all a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so far. Yeah, I think we're on a page.
So then,
I want to ask Eddie a quick question going on this. Eddie, as a longtime maker of games, how much does Pugmire cost? If I was just going to go buy the source book, roughly.
Right now, I believe we're selling it for $60.
Okay.
With that, yeah.
Do you think if tomorrow you told people, hey, I'm sorry, this book is now $120, as many people would buy the game?
God, no.
Okay. So there is a price sensitivity. There is a certain amount that people expect to pay for a certain kind of product. There's a little bit of what's called elasticity around it. You can stretch it a little bit, but for example, you couldn't come in and double it and sell as many.
Well, I mean, you can't even really increase it. Like, price increases are notoriously hard to do in the tabletop sphere. But to use a more common example, people lost their minds when Nintendo announced that Switch games are going to go up in price. Yes. And it was like, what, $20 more? I mean, it wasn't a huge increase, but people lost their ever-loving minds over it.
Correct.
Because that is a common reaction. There's a reason why Steam sales are so popular, is because, people want to feel like they're getting one over on the greedy corporations.
Even though, and we have to remind people of this all the time, it only counts as saving money if you play the game you bought.
Right.
Chat, looking at you. It only counts as saving money if you actually play it and don't just put it in the backlog pile.
If you hadn't been able to come on this week, Will and I the topic we'd been planning was actually talking about the anchoring effect and the Switch 2.
Exactly what you brought up. So you're validating.
So probably next week or the week after, we'll be talking specifically about that. But that is a good.
Fair enough.
No, that's a good lead in.
Good analogy, right? Yeah, because
people lost their mind when it went up. Certain people.
like when we talked about when I did the video for the 2020 problems, the game industry had a similar conversation because to reduce that video down very, very much, go watch the video. I'm very proud of it. The cost of paper and cardboard primarily went up because it became scarce, and so therefore the ability to make a physical book went up, and so a lot of publishers had to go, we have to charge more for books. And when that happens, eventually people get used to that, and so some people feel like, okay, well, the answer is, well, then after that's passed, you bring the price back down. A, that doesn't happen. But B, it's not just because of greed. It's also because you don't know when the next thing like that is going to happen.
Right.
And also, a lot of times when the paper prices and card prices went up, they also didn't really come back down. So like the only people who are winning are the people who own the core resources, really. Oil often goes through these problems too. So I mean, like it's it's always a push to get that price up, and it's usually I think it's fair to say a year to 18 months before people become normalized to the new price point.
Sure. Okay.
But even then, it's got to be in increments. And a good example actually is I have been reading about the UK comic of Sonic the Hedgehog. I swear this is on topic. I promise you.
I'm willing to go for the ride regardless.
Let's go.
So the UK had their own bi-weekly Sonic the Hedgehog comic called Sonic the Comic. And one of the things that's nice about them is that because they're out of print and no one knows entirely where the rights are, it's lots of scans of the original magazine from the 90s are available pretty easily online, including the front matter, where they usually have an editor talking about, fun kids, hey kids, just in the book, whatnot. But they do occasionally talk about how to increase the cover cost. It's like, cost of price, paper's gone up, whatever, so we had to increase the cover cost. And every time they did that, they always shipped the first issue or two with a free gift as a way to kind of make people feel like they were getting something extra for that price point, but then the free gifts stop, but the price point stays the same. That was their way to handle, we need to get people used to this price increase. Yeah, right. So we have to do the same thing, right? So what value can we give to people while increasing the cost that don't impact our ability to make money, right?
Right.
And that conversation was happening in the industry 5 years ago in 2020, and now this is a much harder one because you're right. Like, if you increase the cost, you lose customers. Always, it just always happens. But if as you said, there's weird math. If you lose only less people than you keep who will stay at the normal new price point, you can offset that loss.
Right. So if I increase the price by 15%. But 10% of my purchasing audience leaves, I still have the potential to wind up ahead.
Right, exactly.
But depending upon material costs, but if your actual cost went up by 10%, there's weird math around it, but yes, and that isn't just on people doing price points for any product do that math. It's like if we sold this for $3, how many people would buy it? Well, if we sold it for $4, would a third less people buy it? So you get this kind of math going on all the time as people try and figure out what to sell anything for.
Yeah.
Right. And I know a version of this happens when back when the iPhone App Store first launched, there was a race to the bottom for a long time of everything, as cheap as possible. And there was a climb for other app creators to go, we need to sell us at certain amounts to actually make money. We have to convince people that a premium dollar amount is worth that. And now it's muddied for different reasons, but the point is that it took a long time for people to realize, just because I get this game for 99 cents, this other game that's worth $10 is actually better and therefore worth more of my time. It took a long time to get people even remotely used to that, and still not entirely a one battle.
And so part of that was actually Apple's fault because Apple wanted to sell everything for 99 cents because that's how much songs sold for. And there's a whole story there. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, but the point, but I was bringing it up because there's a boil the frog thing. It's like you can slowly get people increasing, and they'll accept smaller increases over time. But like you said, like if I double my price, if I have to sell this book now for $120, there's no way I'm offsetting that with the amount of people I'm losing, right? I'm selling probably next to no books,
right?
Because people do not think a 256-page full-color book is worth $120.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about this. So the margins are small, right? We're talking a couple of dollars to the original creator per unit sold. We're talking about a long period of rev up necessary to increase the cost. We're talking or increase the price, excuse me. The cost is dramatically increasing very shortly, right? In over a very short period of time, right? I suppose it could be in economic terms, it was essentially instantly. It instantly went from 0 to 154% right now. Nonsensically high.
And some people have 254%, which is even weirder.
Yeah, right.
How does that work?
There's apparently, I didn't do the research in this part, I admit, because I know that board games and books are exempt from this, but some areas of production have an additional 100% tariff on top of that, based on which I think it's cars and electronics or something like that. I mean, so it's I didn't look too deeply into it, but yeah, some places have even more. It's ridiculous.
Right. Okay. So if all of that is true, what are the recourse, like what now, right? Okay, so we have Hectomancer, we have begun.
Let me show one extra thing in here just to make it a tiny bit more complicated. Do you remember that Kickstarter I talked about that we did, the calendars? We sold out of them and had to order another batch to bring into the store, because the store we put them in, we'd asked them to hold X amount back for everybody who pledged on Kickstarter. They didn't. Right. So we ended up with a tiny amount of people that hadn't gotten their calendar and couldn't because we were out. So we had to do a reorder. So we did a reorder and we ordered some more because, like, hey, we'll sell them. So we ordered them from the original printer. They got put on the boat and then the tariffs came in. So we had already ordered these, paid for them. They were shipping. So the escalating cost of the tariff literally was an instant thing.
Yes.
Like they were on the boat coming over. It wasn't like we could be like, hey, let's reconsider this.
Yeah.
They'd already been printed. Right. We already had the invoice. There was going to be the tariffing fee as soon as they came in.
Right. So let's
just saying those tariffs weren't doing what, if the theoretical thing was we should onshore more manufacturing.
Right.
The instant version of that basically left no time for it. It was something else entirely.
Let's real quick just dive into the mechanics of this, because I think it's important. So tariffs in this case are not paid by the tariffs are not paid in the country of origination. Right? They're not paid in China. You don't pay the printer more in China for the good. It's paid as a customs duty when it enters the United States, which is why being on the boat matters, because there's no money due except to the people. Like the freight cost, right, is paid when you load it and it goes to the place. And then when it gets there, that's when customs and import fees and tariffs and duties and all of that is due in the country where it's landing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
and to be clear, if that happens, if it lands and the person who ordered that stuff goes, I'm not paying that money, it doesn't get shipped back because that's another cost. It gets pulped. It gets destroyed.
Yeah, that's correct. So because no one wants to hold it because, again, warehousing fees, right? All of this is money moving around. So
basically it is pay it or lose it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So what now, right? What are so let's
for us, we paid the fees so we could put the thing in our store and fulfill our obligations to our people. And luckily, there was enough margin on that we didn't come in at like 150. We came in at like something lower, that we will at least not lose money on it.
Okay. So the options are as follows. I think so. American companies wanting to sell games to an American audience of tabletop gamers have the following options, and we can sort of go through them. One, they could do what it is theoretically being encouraged to do with the tariffs and onshore production. We've discussed that. that's not really viable in the near or even significantly.
My guess is if somebody was interested, you could maybe even get a venture fund to back you. You could go stand up facilities and in somewhere between 2 to 3 years, have a facility up and running that could do the kind of manufacturing for board games in the United States.
But that's one facility, right? So like, yes, you would do that. But
multiple people could do this.
Right.
But my guess is it is a 2 to 3 year setup time to put it together, find the facility, get all of the equipment, get it all installed, and then train up the people on how to use it. And even like beforehand, figuring out what you need to buy the right stuff and or make the right stuff, bring it in. Like the setup time for that isn't like, oh, let's go set it up.
Right.
It is a multi-year process involving significant amounts of capital before you ever see any sort of return.
And hiring the right talent to know how to do it.
And let's pretend for a moment that we could freeze the industry, that we could say that every board gamer was cool with not buying any of the game that, not participating in their hobby monetarily for 2 to 3 years, and would all immediately return to that hobby in 2 or 3 years when manufacturing gets onshored to the US. This is a completely counterfactual hypothetical, by the way. There's no way in the world that would happen, but it's a best case. A best case.
And every studio could pause and not have to pay their employees for 2 to 3 years while we waited.
Also counterfactual. The price would still go up.
Yep.
The price would still be higher in 2 to 3 years than people left it, right? Of necessity, because of the cost of goods sold and the multiplier and all of those things, and inflation in 2 to 3 years. Who knows what that's going to be? Right. So the cost would still go up, and people would still, you would still lose people, even if they were frozen, excuse me, with no other influences for those 2 to 3 years, because the cost was going up. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that would also assume, okay, this is going to be, we're going to get slightly into politics here, a consistent and long-term plan.
Correct.
Because if somebody had come and said, hey, 3 years from now, we're going to be putting 100% tariffs on all of these things. You have 3 years to get your house in order and onshore more things. That would be enough. And it said, and we will not back down. You know, that would be enough time for entrepreneurial people go get things set up, and companies would start planning against what those groups were going to charge. They'd weigh it against the 100% tariff coming in. They'd do the math, and they would plan out their budgets and their operating costs around that. If that got said, and then 2 months later, they're like, oh, it's going to be 150%. And then 2 months later, they're like, oh, it's actually only going to be 50. All the people trying to do the planning of, should we go build these things and invest in this, also have a chance to get effed over. Because if there's no stability, you can't go take something that's going to take years to set up and say, this is what it's worth investing my time and money in.
Yes. So the instability in the landscape of international trade right now is part of the problem.
And is working against people actually doing the setup of things like somebody who could do these kinds of books or these kinds of dice or these kinds of sandies or these kinds of maps in other places.
Okay, so let's pull this apart a little further too. So let's assume that companies are going to try and play ball, that they are going to try and manufacture in the way that they have always done and find a way through spreadsheet wizardry to make the math work. They're going to try and make all of the math work in such a way that they can make enough profit to keep their company sustainable, that they can still sell the product at a price that consumers will buy, and the consumer won't be bucked by a sudden doubling of price, right? Where in the spreadsheet math does the money for, we're going to keep the numbers really simple, we're going to say 100% tariff, right? That is
easy math.
It's easy math. It's for the sake of argument. The numbers are fluctuating and will probably be different when you're watching this if it's not April 24th. Okay.
Right.
Where is there flex to do this? Right. Or is there flex to do this? Right. That's sort of.
What do you mean by flex?
Where is there room in the budgeting, in this magical spreadsheet wizardry, to accommodate 100% tariff get on the initial good making it into the United States.
So let's talk about that then. So say Eddy's planning to sell his pack for $60. Yep. And that's everything involved in it. So that means we know that it can't cost more than $12 tops.
Mm-hmm.
So and let's say he's come in under that. He's managed to do it for 10.
Right.
I'm just throwing out some hypotheticals.
It's pretty reasonable, yeah.
So, okay, the 100% tariff isn't on the $60 thing. It's on the actual cost of what he's manufacturing. So what he would be looking at is saying the $10 is going to go up to 20. Mm-hmm. And I need it to be at 12 or under to fit the rest of these. And if he can't do that, that either means, so we know, so say he was making the $3 profit at $12. And if he could do it for 10, that means he's making $5 profit instead of $3 profit on a per book he sells basis. Mm-hmm. If that cost goes from 10 to 20, he's now losing $8 for every book he sells, assuming that they can't raise the final price of the books enough to stretch it out, that the distributor and then the retailers, who each also need to do a multiple on top of that. Like, there might be something where the distributor's like, well, you know, I'm willing to buy this instead of for 12 for 15. We could eat up to $3 on this to keep continuing. I'm giving an example.
Right.
Cool. Now he's only losing $5 per. And like, you know, or maybe they can convince the stores to, instead of buying it for 25 and going to 50, to buy it for 30 and go to 50. And so that might let the distributor move their 5 up. So theoretically, at 100%, if the store made less money, the distributor made less money, and Eddy was willing to make like $1 per book, that the math might shift up enough if you could get all of those people to agree.
Right. And they probably won't.
Right.
Yeah. And so like Jeff's case is a good one, right?
Actually, Eddy, did I do roughly the math right on how that would have to work?
I mean, yeah, but for made up numbers, that works about right. I mean, you know, but that's also, I think we're kind of where Will's going here is that that's assuming that everything else is also static, which is not going to be true either, because the distributors are probably going to have increased costs because they have to, you know, they also have resources they need to acquire, some of which is going to be overseas. So that's also going to get tariffed. The game stores are going to have to get some resources that may have to come from overseas. So that might get tariffed. So like everyone's costs are going to increase on top of all of this stuff. So yeah, I mean, like if they can fudge their numbers to make less money, that's a nice thing to have, but they're probably not for perfectly mundane reasons that aren't just like, well, no, screw you. It's no, I just can't. I can't make that work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that leaves sort of this, and we should also clarify one of the reasons that none of the that flex room that we're talking about doesn't really exist is that none of this exists in a vacuum, right? None of this exists in a vacuum of people are only buying board games and are otherwise, you know, everything else is the same, right? One of the problems is that the reason that no one is willing to eat those cost decreases is that volume of board games sold will, due to external factors that are not directly the tariffs on board games, go down. Right.
Because the money that whether you spend on a board game now has to go for food or rents or
correct. And this is because let's talk about this part of it, which I think is a very salient point. There have been suggestions, and again, this is largely in the soundbite social media crowd, right? That well, why not just make the consumer pay the full amount of the tariff at the end of the chain, right? That if people and this is the idea, right? And so let's examine that world just ever so briefly. That gets in the face of the cost elasticity problem that we were talking about, right? That gets in the face of the multiplier math, right, for the MSRP. And
actually, the big one, that puts the entire burden of the collection on the retailer.
Yes.
In other words, you're telling the game store, and you'd have to charge the 60 plus the extra 10 cost But what that means is it's the board game store or the game store responsible for all of that, and anything they don't sell or anything that happens along the way, they're stuck with that inventory plus the $10 cost on top. It's basically making them take all of the risk, which is something that most mom and pop or even broad, more national stores, they also don't have that in their budget.
Right. Yep. Here's the other one, by the way. This is where this gets a little weird. If you there's the problem with tax on tax. There's sort of a problem with tariff on tariffs as well.
I'm going to get the cat from meowing on air.
Yeah, that's part of this equation, right? That there's also a world where, because you're charging it at the point of sale, you need to charge more to cover the tariffs on the value that you're charging the consumer. That gets a little esoteric. Just know that if you do it that way, it will be more than the listed tariff as an increase. Right.
But I mean, I think there's a psychological thing that you're talking about here, which is valid. Is that for people who don't know, watching the stream, I'm actually living in the UK now, despite what I sound like.
Okay.
And so we do have tax on items here. It's called VAT, but it's rolled into the cost of the item most times. So if something's listed for £4, I pay £4. I may actually be buying it for £3.50 with 50 pence of VAT, but I see £4, I'm paying £4. So I don't think I'm paying tax, right? Yes. In the US, sales tax is by state, so it gets added on after cost. If you're adding a tariff on top of that, what the consumer's going is, oh, this book says it's $60. I have $60 in my pocket. I'm going to go pay for that. No, I just have to pay $85.
Yes.
And they're going to blame the store owner for not accurately representing their product. But if you put a sticker on that saying this is actually cost $85, not $60, the customer's not going to pick it up because why am I paying more for the thing? The book says it's $60. Why am I paying $85 for it?
Yeah.
And by the way, this is so common that they've had to make regulation against it. Like if you go look at there was one for airline pricing, like this is a $400 ticket. And then, you put it in your card and it's like, here's the fuel surcharge, here's the tax, here's the so-and-so, here's the so-and-so, and your $400 ticket is now $542, and you're like, where did all that come from? Like, it's the surprise. People hate surprise costs. Like the Expedia travel website, one of their selling points is when you look at a hotel on Expedia, they will list the entire cost, the tax, the city charge, the resort fee, whatever it is the price you're seeing is the actual price you will pay. Like it's become that's actually a selling point. We can tell you what your actual cost is, so you won't be surprised.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
that's the world we're living in. Is that that has become a selling point of knowing what the actual price is.
Right. Here's another one, and this one. Thank you so much to DemonWorks over in Twitch chat. I'll put it on screen because I think this is an absolutely incredible point. So let's go to your local game store.
Ooh,
let's go to your local game store and think about the number of games on the wall. Most of them, we'll go with most of them, are made in China because China's a place that specializes in this kind of manufacturing, and that's where it's made. Not all of them.
Nope.
So now there's an additional thing that has to get covered, which is they need to know how much tax to charge based on country of origin for each product in the store. And this is on top of the work that local game store employees are already expected to do. Think about your local game store. Think about all the things your local game store employee already has to do. Think about them also having to worry about country of origin for every game.
Think about when they mess it up and the store owner then has to actually balance their books against it.
Correct.
Yep.
Right? It becomes...
I actually get you a real world example of that because again I live in the UK and so if you want a example of how this works, we can talk about Brexit, right? There are websites that are like European websites that go in because of the Brexit's tariffs. We just won't ship to the UK anymore. I'm sorry, UK customers, we can't sell to you because of Brexit. And that is already happening in a lot of places where a lot of non-U.S. companies are just going, we're just not selling to the U.S. anymore.
Right.
That's just it.
It is no longer worth our time.
Correct.
Right. Because and the the Brexit examples on the website you should give are we don't have the overhead to handle the paperwork, and it's purely paperwork for a lot of the stuff. It's like it's not a huge cost change. It's just there's additional paperwork that they don't have the overhead for. So yeah, I mean it's not even a financial cost; it's a logistics cost on top of everything else. And again, it's all going to be at the point of sale. Now, I will quickly mention, since we're in this very topic, that BackerKit just today, double checking real quick, last week. Okay, so within a few days, they have rolled out a tariff manager.
Good.
So for crowdfunding campaigns, if you're using BackerKit, you can tell people, okay, we're ready to ship to you, so we can manage tariff by country, because everyone has to put their country for the shipping address. So you can say, cool, everyone who's going to the U.S., add this percentage on and give them this notification as to why they're having to pay this, and it's listed as a separate item when they check out. This is how much you have to pay for tariffs. So BackerKit's already got a tool for that.
I've actually heard of a couple of companies setting up so that they now have fulfillment centers in the U.S. and out of the U.S., so that the fulfillment centers out of the U.S. can have things shipped to them. Like if something going to Canada, you can put a fulfillment center in Canada, and therefore doesn't get the tariff from the U.S. because it never came into the U.S.
Right.
This, of course, involves you setting up an entirely new fulfillment center, which is additional cost just to get around. But it's like, it is crazy the workarounds we're already seeing people.
Well, but again, like Brexit has shown an example of how this has already happened, right? Because in Ireland's
that's right.
A lot of Ireland. I'm going to really reduce here, and I apologize to all my Irish friends. I'm going to be very reductive to a very complicated situation. I apologize. But Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland is in the EU, Northern Ireland is in the UK, and Brexit. There is not a hard trade wall between those two countries for very complicated reasons.
Very.
So,
extremely.
Right. But the point is like, what you could do is, if you lived in the Republic of Ireland, if you ordered from the UK, there would be additional surcharge and usually paperwork involved with that. Even if you ordered from Belfast, you're driving down the road, right, as it were. But there's still a charge. So in Ireland, when I lived there, they actually have an entire set of websites. They do virtual addresses where literally you go, my house is in Belfast. The Amazon in the UK sends it to Belfast, and then this company then drives it over the border effectively. And it gives you a very small charge. It's less than the amount that you would have to pay otherwise. I suspect some kind of virtual address is probably going to start happening. People are going, no, we're shipping from Canada, and so we got on a boat, schlepped it across, it's in Canada now. So officially we're shipping from Canada. We're not shipping from the US, so there's no tariff here. I expect that kind of stuff's going to start happening once people get the logistics in place.
Right. Okay. So, and
actually, quick question. I'm clicking the wrong thing. Isn't that smuggling?
Great question.
Technically,
I am not a lawyer. Next question.
Right. I mean,
draw your own conclusion.
The fact that these,
yeah, right.
Real life fans, yes. I mean, the fact that I was able to use this myself in 2017 and it was perfectly legal seems like they had found a way around it. But again, part of the reason why Ireland was able to do it is because that situation is so complicated. Most people are just like, I guess,
I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Correct. So, all right. So we're talking about a lot of things, pain and suffering that people are going through, right? BackerKit has a new thing where you can pass the cost on to backers if you need to, or if you decide that that's the route you want to go. Jeff's talking about the paperwork. We've talked about some of the paperwork. So if you're not getting the money from, and we should also address, there's also this belief that is largely brought on by political rhetoric that the tariffs are paid by someone in the country of origin of the goods and not the person receiving them.
Right.
That's also not the case. We can go deeper into the reason some other time if we need to.
Even if it was, if the manufacturer was like, hey, we're going to charge you $5 per calendar and then this comes on, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, we are now charging you because of this $10 per count. It's not like they're going to eat the cost.
Correct.
Because they have no reason to.
Right. So even in that case, ultimately, the consumer will still end up, and the commissioner, right, of the work, right, the company that is commissioning the product to be made, and the consumer will ultimately end up bearing the weight of those tariffs, regardless of who is officially paying them, just so we're all on the same page. So if they don't do all these things, then they go out of business.
Let's talk about what's happened.
Let's talk about this. So
let me start with one I know, the softball tee it up to hand it over to Eddy to take a big swing.
Yeah.
So one of my buddies that I was on an advisory board with a couple of years ago for a fun startup, his job, check this out for a cool job. He runs a company that if you want to sell something on Amazon, they are an advertising marketing specialist company. You can bring your product in and they will optimize it for the Amazon store. They will help you get your shots, your product shots. They will help you to how to do the right listing. They will basically make it so that you can sell well on Amazon. It's like having somebody walk you in and say, this is how you do a Kickstarter, or this is how you do anything, or that's what he does, or his whole agency. And he has a lot of small companies that basically have found a cool thing and get it manufactured in China, bring it in, and this guy helps them optimize their store to sell, their backyard croquet sets or, anything that they're doing. I was chatting with him yesterday. He said in the past 30 days, he has had 3 clients, in the past week or two, he's had 3 clients give 30-day notice that they are going out of business. That it isn't worth thinking to trim down. It is 3 clients have told him 30-day notice because that's in our contract. We are officially going out of business because of the new costs. So this isn't a theoretical. That is talking to my buddy. 3 of his own clients are now going out of business specifically because of this.
Right.
Ricardo, the president over at Hit Point Press, who we were working with for their Humblewood Kickstarter, which is going on right now, was quoted in Polygon, and we were chatting with him because their Kickstarter went live like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they were trying to figure out what they needed, and like they couldn't delay it. They had everything else moving. They'd been hired publicity for it, everything. They were trying to figure out what their books were going to cost because they needed to be able to set a Kickstarter price so that people could pledge and get a package. And like, they were just having to guess, and they're making their best guess. And if things go poorly, like that's a small publisher of cool things that might get completely effed over because they didn't guess high enough. But if they, of course, put it too high, nobody's going to pledge to their Kickstarter.
Right. Yep. And I really dislike, in a world of analytics and pricing models and data tracking and trend tracking, right? There's all of, we have more than a dozen years of Kickstarter history. We have all of this data about board game trends and board game purchasing habits and Board Game Geek and all of this stuff. And some of the best minds in the business who run some of the most reputable small studios are resorting to, I guess we'll just guess.
Yeah,
which is its own now. Yeah, which is its own cost, right? So, Eddy, you brought us a couple of stories about the what if they can't keep up. Oh, yeah, a few. Right? I'm underselling it.
So behind the scenes, I got a Google doc a couple days ago, and it's like, here's 5 or 6 points things we talk about, and I dumped like a page and a half of links.
It's good, and I read pretty much everything you sent us to help us catch up, because Eddy's the expert here and knows, like, I didn't know that some of these websites existed when I was looking into this, so it was very helpful.
Nice. So I mean, we said is some companies are dead. Boardlandia, the company maybe not many people know about, Boardlandia has shuttered themselves. A company more people are probably familiar with, Greater Than Games, who make Sentinels of the Multiverse, they're done. They're all unemployed. So that's not a, we're declaring bankruptcy and restructuring. No, they're just done.
Right.
One thing we haven't talked about much is in the midst of all of this, before the tariff stuff happened, Diamond Distributor, who owns Alliance, who handles most of the tabletop distribution in the US, that declared bankruptcy in November, December. And they went through bankruptcy court, and now there's a lawsuit going on about who's legally allowed to buy them. So that's a whole nother problem that has nothing to do with tariffs. That's also making US distribution difficult. But I mean, there are some options. One is the Cosmere. I never get it right. Cosmere role-playing game. Brandon Sanderson's. Is that Brandon Sanderson making it? He's licensed it to another company.
Brotherwise Games printing for Sanderson.
Yeah. Yeah, because IP law. They did a really nice breakdown of what they're planning to do, which again, with what Will said, a certain amount of we're just guessing here, right? And they're being open about that. But they have a plan of like, we're going to do our digital stuff is fine because digital is exempt from tariffs. We're going to look into our fulfillment plans so that way we can try to get as much fulfillment done outside the U.S. for international backers. So that way, non-U.S. backers are getting fulfilled from a non-U.S. distribution area, and that should happen on time. The U.S. fulfillment's just going to have to wait until we figure this out, and we're going to keep making it. I mean, that's their plan. Which it's a very nice document. It's very weighed out. It has lots of good points, but ultimately comes down to everyone else outside the U.S. are pivoting a little bit. The U.S.
Actually, as we were having this conversation, I learned big thanks to YouTube chat. Cool Mini or Not is doing a huge restructure and layoff. Like that's right now. That was like 5 hours ago, right? So 4 hours before we started this conversation.
Right. Yeah. I'm not surprised. I've been hearing rumors in the back channel about stuff.
Simon's not necessarily been in the best shape since the pandemic. And let's talk about that real quick. Part of the other problem is this is not, again, none of these things are happening in isolation. And we would be, while we're trying to focus on tariffs as a cause of this problem, right, and analyze the way that tariffs are caused, part of the underlying problem is that the industry was already unstable. Let
me talk about war chests for a moment.
Yeah.
So, as the studio director of Extra Credits and Extra History, one of the things that I try and do, and I've done this for every company I've ever run, because this is just best practice, is you try and have a certain amount in the bank. Well, a lot of game studios, like I call it a war chest because like when I first was working for Sony and then for Monolith, that's what they called it. So that's how I learned.
Right.
Like Monolith is actually a good example. Monolith Productions, which I was working at back in the early to mid 2000s. I was on a DC game. They were making Matrix Online. They were making Fear and Condemned. They would save up off of the game they made. And that was how much money they had, which was how long they could pay people to make their next game before they had to go shop for a publisher to give them the rest of the money to make the game. And then the money they made off of that would give them enough runway to go make the next one. They called it building up the war chest. How much money do we have in the bank that can pay people before we're screwed? And whether any company you work at has that. They don't generally tell their employees that because sometimes it's a very scary number. And when you're like, wait, you guys have 2 months worth of money in the bank, and if we don't get a new thing, we're all out of business. Like, that is way more common than anybody knows.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you try and do as a studio head is you try and make sure you have the biggest war chest you can in the bank so that if something catastrophically bad happens, like say Rob, our lead writer for history, got sick and we couldn't, for some reason, contract with any of our backup writers. We have backup writers just for this reason. And Rob stopped writing scripts for a month. Well, without scripts, we can't do voiceover. Without voiceover, we can't do animation. Without all of that, we can't put out a video. Like, we might stop. Again, we have backups for this, but just giving that as an example, that's what you have a war chest for. To make sure you don't just have to say, hey, everybody, sorry, we're done. Go find a new job. The pandemic for the board game industry wrecked everybody's war chests. just straight up. Very responsible companies that had been very tight on their budgeting to build up the war chest so that they would have that runway. Spent a lot of it during the pandemic trying to go as long as possible without firing employees.
Those, by the way, those companies that were the ones that were extremely studious and financially responsible and saved up big war chests are the ones that survived as companies through the pandemic, right? Because again, the alternative to that was, and we're out of business because no one is gathering in places, no one is going shopping for luxury goods recreationally right now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And really quick, slight pivot, but you will notice that from 2021 till now, the huge uptick in IP-based tabletop games that are going through Kickstarter, because all those companies are like, we need to get fast wins to build that war chest back up. So yeah, we're gonna do
time to cash in, baby.
Yeah, we're gonna do the Avatar tabletop role playing game. We're gonna do Dark Souls tabletop game. Because that nostalgia, the people who love those properties will back them. They'll more going to get an increase in results of that. They can use that money to then invest in the games maybe they want to make or to keep things afloat. And then this comes along just as they probably start building that back up. And so related to that, we go to Stonemaier Games. They do Wingspan, probably the game that most people will recognize. They're getting a class action lawsuit together against the president. They announced it on the 21st, and by the time we're recording this, they said anybody else who wants to join this lawsuit can. 3 days later, it's like our law firm has said we have enough people, can't take any more. Thank you for your time. So that's how big of a response they've gotten. But in their notes, they marked that. Of all the stuff they've already printed, nothing new, but just all the stuff that's already already in the process of being printed or ready to ship out, $1.5 million in tariff costs for them. That's a huge. There's no war chest that covers a $1.5 million hit, right?
Or a tabletop board game group.
No.
Maybe
a video
other
game
groups.
studio even would look at that and go, wait a minute, what?
Right, and so. It's not merely this event, right? It is, as with all things, this event in this time, in this fashion, right? Especially because one of the things that, if this were a one-time thing, we know this is the end of it, we know it's going to be stable after this one event, there is a possibility that additional venture capital, additional backing.
Maybe you go take a loan out from the bank against your house mortgage or something.
Which is, by the way, sounds super scary and is way more common than I think any of us would like it to be. And this is where the instability comes back into play. No one is going to give them money because this is so unstable. Because this industry, right, is having this instability due to factors that they don't control. Right? There's no way that I can't see a venture capital firm being like.
Quick note: if you lend somebody money, you want to make it back plus some.
Yeah,
that is generally
that's how it works.
Right? Yeah,
because if you don't, by the way, then you don't have money to lend to other people.
Right. So there's no way that I think any reasonable venture capital firm thinks that Cool Mini or not, or Orlandi or any of these other companies that have been experiencing this financial trouble and have exhausted all of their other options, right? The reason that they've exhausted all their other options is because the people who have money won't lend it here because it's not a sound investment because of the instability, right? Not because those companies did anything wrong, to be clear.
The good money right now is in going and saying, do we think it is worth building the infrastructure that all these people will have to use at another time?
Yeah.
And again, this are things that we had a solution previously, because before the pandemic, Asmodee was being very aggressive at buying up board game companies because they're trying to do exactly this. It's like, let's get a whole bunch of board game companies under one umbrella. We can share distribution sources. We can share production resources. We can make those games more cheaply at a large scale, and then therefore each studio makes more money. And then the pandemic hit, and because Asmodee was so big and had done that, they were able to absorb a lot of that. But over the past several years, Asmodee has been starting to bleed off some of the studios they'd picked up.
That because they got saddled with all the debt from the VC firm that owned Asmodee. But
well, there's that too, right? I mean, there are other factors
a
too.
variety of reasons. But yes.
But so Asmodee, if it hadn't had that 2020 hit and that other VC hit, might have been in a position to do exactly that. It's like we could buy up Greater Than Games, we could buy up Cool Mini or Not, and then get them through. But they can't now because they're also struggling. Cool Mini or Not also did some of this too, right? So like it's Turtles all the way down, on some level.
Yeah. So that's sort of
Turtles. That's a shell game, Eddie.
Oh boy. We needed that because so I think we've covered most of the analytical basis of what is currently happening, right? Mm-hmm. That is how tariffs work, why tariffs are such a problem for the board game industry, all of the ways that people have tried to get through the tariffs. I'm gonna now open it up for a little bit of forecasting.
Okay.
Which is kind of, is a little dark. Where do we think this goes from here? Right? What do we think happens to the industry?
So one thing, we've actually had a good example of this. Was it, which was the one a couple of years ago that during the pandemic, was it Darkest Dungeon board game? What was the one that basically from the Kickstarter, they had a big one, but then all the costs rose because it doubled because of the pandemic.
They asked all the backers to pay more.
Yeah.
And they basically came back to their backers and said, we are going to go out of business if we cannot get you to pay more. And they didn't say it as well as they could have. But their basic one was, we promised to sell this to you for X. It's now X plus Y% on top of that, because otherwise we're out of business and nobody gets anything. And that was not terribly well received. I mean, it was true from their part. They were in a really awful situation where they'd collected the money, knowing things were going to cost X, and suddenly things cost Y. And they looked at that and said, oh, if we pay that, we're out of business.
Similarly, the Robotech board game also funded around, I think they funded either right before or right in 2020. Same thing. The cost, they handled it, I'll just say, not as well as they could have. And they don't exist anymore, right? They're done. They did not survive that. And that was, like we've been saying, that was one set of factors. Now those set of factors on top of this set of factors, we're going to lose more companies. I mean, that's just straight up. I mean, I don't want to doomsay too much, but it's just going to happen. Right now, Cephalofair, who do Gloomhaven, they just did an interview. The CEO did an interview where it is, they have a bunch of stuff for Gloomhaven 2 that's just sitting in a warehouse in China. Luckily, they weren't on the boat yet when this happened. So it's not actually shipping right now. But it's we can sit on that. We can afford the cost for that for a while. We can't afford the, again, 1 million, I believe, or 800,000, something like that. It's a very large number of just the tariffs. So they're just sitting in China waiting.
Right.
What may happen for that is
big enough that they could probably do that for a little while, but not too long.
Or they're going to concentrate on selling it to everywhere except the U.S.
Well, that's another part, right?
It might just be that they're over time, they will just try and keep selling it to Europe and Canada and, other people who like that property.
Yeah. Here's sort of yeah, go ahead.
I was saying, so that's what's my next forecast. I think Eurogaming is going to skyrocket again, because Europeans are going to start selling games to Europeans in other parts of the world, and that's going to really take off. And sadly, American game design is going to get a bit more isolated. I do think there's going to be an increase in digital and print-on-demand production, because one of the nice things about POD is that particularly Lightning Source, which is one of the bigger print-on-demand companies, they have printers all over the world. So if I get a POD book here in London, it's getting printed somewhere in the UK. It's not getting printed in the US. So I don't have to worry about that. People in the US, there are printers in the US that can get a POD book shipped within the US. So POD is going to be a big way around that. But, some people don't like the quality of print on demand. So that's going to be another challenging point.
And that will also apply, by the way, to miniatures. I've recently found a studio that's licensed out their print-on-demand files for miniatures, for fantasy miniatures, because I wanted to paint some fantasy minis, and I was looking around to see what was around, and they make really cool
Was it Hero Forge or somewhere else?
Oh, somewhere else. It's I forget the name of the company, but I found a printer in my state that makes them, right? That makes them, and it's, you know, a day of shipping plus print time. So that may also be a thing. Weirdly,
all of these options, by the way, are more expensive than people are used to paying.
Correct.
Yes.
Weirdly, by the way, one of the companies that might come out looking good or ahead is Games Workshop, because Games Workshop minis are all made in Nottingham, in the UK. They're not made in China. So they may weirdly end up being sort of a stable factor in tabletop, because we haven't talked about war games, right? We're just talking about board games. War games are sort of a weird fusion hybrid under tabletop RPGs and board games, in that they include most of the components of both of those.
So I bet they still get their books printed in China, even if they make their minis in.
That's a really great point, Jeff. And no one's really sure where they get them printed.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, hang on.
I could go behind the green screen and pull.
I have my Combat Patrol thing here, so I can check to see where they get it printed at. Manufactured in Nottingham, actually.
Oh, cool. Great. They've got a printer in Nottingham. Okay, so they might be a company that comes out okay, but others won't. I think War Games Factory tried to move to the US at one point.
Maybe.
But the minis industry is going to be a thing. And then the other one, right? And we've been bringing it up a couple of times, is, and this is sort of the unavoidable truth, one of the other pains that this industry is going to be going through is, because tariffs don't just apply to board games, the purchasing power available to consumers will decrease, because the cost of everything will go up, right? So I think
less discretionary spending means
correct. And so what I think we're also going to see, because people have less discretionary spending, is we're going to see a rise in very compact, very high quality focused games that don't do the big Kickstarter box with 10 million miniatures anymore. We're going to see a lot more stuff where they expect to sell a lot at a lower unit cost, because that is a way that you can accommodate some of this, right? Because people generally don't think of cost in percentages. They think of it in absolute terms. So if you make a very small micro game or some other smaller kind of game that can absorb the tariffs, people might pick that up, right? When they're...
My forecast going actually off of that is more large print run games. I think we're going to lose a lot of the small ones. Like, you'll still be able to go to Target and find Clue.
Yeah.
Because Clue is a stack. Like, Monopoly is actually a little harder, but not that much. I'm just like thinking of pieces in their Risk. You know, we're going to find these big games that they can go print a couple of million copies at a time to get there. Remember at the beginning, we were talking about how costs go down the more you print. Games that can afford to print, you know, Mattel and Hasbro games that they can afford to print millions of these at a time and basically bring in and pay the tariff fee, because their cost was so low to begin with because of the quantity that they were producing. And they're already doing equivalently a very high markup for what's actually in the box. And so I suspect we're going to see a lot more of those, but we're going to lose. People are willing to bet on a thing they know more, or to pay for a thing they know more about, than to experiment on a risky thing when money is tighter.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I do when I think about tabletop role-playing games, I always try to keep an eye on the comic book industry, because there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
They both require specialized printing. They largely sell to a fairly niche audience. And so in particular, also for personal reasons, I've been keeping an eye on the recent Skybound Transformers Kickstarter. They are reprinting all of the original Marvel Comics run, both the US and UK comics, and beautiful big books. They announced it January-ish, so right before I think the tariffs were announced. And so I have been keeping an eye on what those price points are actually going to be. And they launched with about the same as they did last year with their G.I. Joe comic Kickstarter, which it was a bit of a surprise to me. But I think because it's Skybounds, and ultimately, you know, on some level, they're also Image to relatively large companies. I think you're right. It's we can print a whole bunch of these and just eat the difference and not lose money. And that Kickstarter's about, I think right now, close to $3 million. So, I mean, they gambled on this is going to be pretty big, so we're just going to leave the costs as they are and just see what happens, because we can do that volume and we can get there and be fine. I don't think Skybound sourced a non-Chinese printer. I mean, most comic books are printed either in China or the U.S., and most of the specialty books, the leather bounds, the pages that have the metallic edging, the sewn in bookmarks, all that stuff generally is done in China. And these are beautiful leather bound books, so that's probably where it's getting done. So, I mean, you're right. Like, the bigger companies are going to be able to just accept the difference and get that huge backstock of content in, and just they're trading the tariff for warehousing costs, but for them long term, that'll make sense. They'll ride it out. But yeah, anybody below that major corporation level who have huge warehouses who can order millions of units, they're going to struggle, and they're going to have to pivot to, like you said, selling outside the U.S. And while, I mean, Europe is a strong market. Japan and Korea are all strong markets. Collectively together, they're roughly about the same as the U.S. So, like, you can't offset the U.S. market that much.
Right.
And a couple of years from now, this may be different. You know, maybe this does cause people to go build the actual manufacturing facilities here that allow for these to be printed. Because right now we're talking in a scenario where they literally do not exist in the United States. So it is not an option for people to say, yes, I will do so. Yeah. And if so, what we might end up is a winter of a couple of years where it's just trash for those kind of people. And eventually, if those facilities stand up, you might see somewhat of a resurgence. But if that happens, we're going to see a lot of companies go out of business because they're not going to have the funds to last to that point.
There's also, and I think that the scenario you're suggesting does exist. I also think there's kind of an Ouroboros problem where if I'm forecasting 2 or 3 years out to stand up this facility, I also have to predict, will there be demand for that facility in 2 or 3 years? And if the whole industry is crumbling because they can't make products for 2 or 3 years, it may simply be that people don't believe that the demand for the facilities will be there, so they won't begin at all. And that, I don't know what the analysis on that is.
Oh, and as a quick aside to that, if these facilities do get stood up, they're going to be looked to done in the way that is the most long-term profitable, which means you're not going to be bringing in 50 people to run a print shop. It's going to be 3 and the rest is going to be automated. It's all going to be done with robots and software. You're not bringing jobs in for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because people are looking for, how do I make this sustainable long-term for the investment that I'm doing? And that, in this day and age, is automation, robotics, and software.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is no longer people going and manually print setting things in the way you might think.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want another example of what this could look like, I mean, let's look back to the writer's strike, the WGBA writer's strike, because there was like about 6 months they were on strike, which nothing was getting done. And then they had to ramp back up after that. And we're just now kind of getting out of that drought of media. That was a 6-month hit. You know, we're looking at possibly much longer time period for that. You know, theoretically, for companies that are confident they can survive it, yeah, you know, they can continue to make stuff. Like I said, Brandon Sanderson's not going anywhere, so of course they're pretty confident they can keep making the games they're working on, because even though they're working through a different company, there's going to be a demand there, and we'll get through that. So we keep our developers working and keep making stuff. There's a lot of other people who are going to be like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, and a lot of them are just be like, even if they could survive it, I could just go get a job at a bank, you know? So, I mean, we're gonna have a huge hit in creative talent as a result of that, just because of the anxiety and stress of trying to survive all of this, and the anxiety and stress of the people that you want to sell it to giving you crap online because you're not doing it as fast enough, or you're not doing it in the right country, or you're not doing it at the right price point, that's going to wear away people. So there's going to be a psychological cost to all of this too. Again, we saw in 2020, and I talked about in that video in 2020, we're going to have another round of that again. And some people who survived the first one may not survive the second one. Just so it was a bad choice because people actually died in the pandemic, and are still dying. But more to say that as a company, they won't last through as a result of this because there's just one too many hits. So I mean, again, right. But I say all of that because I don't think the industry is going to die, right? For a lot of reasons. One, it's easier than ever to make your own game. Like, a few hours on a computer, tossed up on itch.io, you have a customer base. I mean, it's really trivially easy to make a game of any kind. And I think that will always persist and continue. I think those small indie games will probably rise in popularity to a certain degree because they're much more accessible. Also, when people are stressed and troubled, board games and video games and tabletop games they're a luxury, but they're a good value for money luxury. Yes. So short term, they'll take a huge hit, but long term, they'll recover faster because it's $100, but $100 that gives me months of entertainment versus $100 that's maybe a night out, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. I buy all the D&D books, and now I have me and 3 friends, and me and 4 friends, and have a campaign, and that is a
$100 thing versus like an expensive dinner out.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yep.
Maybe it's one less expensive dinner out, or whatever the thing is.
And also because these games are meant to be socially played and collaboratively played, it's not uncommon for people to go, okay, you know what, we ship in $25 to get this $100 game that we're all going to play. So value for money, these things do provide more entertainments than a movie or a night out or whatever. So they do recover faster. So I don't think it's going to be like the industry is doomed, but specific companies are going to go away. Certain products are going to go away. A lot of talent's going to be lost. So it's going to be a hard road, but there will something will avoid.
Like people are going to go for less risky things because it's harder to do.
Yep.
Yes. A friend of mine told me recently about a psychological thing called expand and exploit. Is that when we're feeling comfortable and confident and we feel like everything's going okay, we as human beings like to expand our horizons. We like to try new things. We like to go out and check out that restaurant we've been meaning to. We like to pick up that book that's maybe really challenging, see some challenging media. When we're stressed out, we exploit. We go to things that we know comfort us and mine that. We watch The Office yet again on Netflix. We read a book that we remember from childhood. We buy that game that reminds us of a thing that we loved 20 years ago. So what's going to happen is, so I say exploits in this very specific context because the game industry will move to exploit mode, not in the exploiting the customer, but rather exploiting known reactions. We know this will do well. We know a reprint of the Transformers comic will do well. We know that a board game based on a very good selling video game franchise will do well. We're not going to do necessarily small woodland animals trying to explore their environment in a tactical game. That kind of game wouldn't necessarily fly now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that I think is a good place for us to end our discussion. Eddy, thank you so much for lending your expertise to this. Geoff, as always, thank you. And to you, our viewer, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have, I've been telling the Breakfast Crew this. Normally, YouTube comments are pithy one-liners. I invite you to say more. If you want to engage in good faith with this whole topic, talk about the future of the board game industry, express how you think this is going to come out, I invite you to use the comment section to say more, to have a conversation in good faith about this topic, because I think this is a big thing that's going to affect all of us in the coming months and years. Thank you so much for joining us as always, and we will see you all next week. Not sure for what, but we'll be here. All right, everybody.
You will see Eddy around because Eddy is part of the extended crew. Eddy will be back.
I'm always around.
All right. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. We'll see you all next time. Say bye to the people, Geoff.
Bye to the people, Geoff.
But we didn't leave. Ha ha.
Haha, secrets.
Secrets.
All these, like,
yeah,
flashy intro and outro things.
We told that a bit ago because we wanted to. Actually, it makes it specifically for like where we clip, like where the show starts and ends. It gives a very clean start and end that's easy to find as we're kind of putting this up for production.
Yeah,
and
just scrub to the black screen, cut there, boom.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And it's already cut. I'm just going to remux it later and throw it up. Yeah, thanks, chat. This is, by the way, this is probably one of the more difficult conversations to have, and both chats engaged in really good faith and talking about this. So yeah, very good job to everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. This is tough, right? Yeah.
I need suggestions, by the way. I haven't yet made a thumbnail for this. I've been trying to think of with the text I'm okay with, but the picture that we put on to basically help sell this idea.
I want, okay, hear me out. Before you judge this. All right. I want a picture from a Muppets Christmas Carol, right? Of the ghost of Christmas yet to come, right? Doing the long finger point at the grave. And the ghost of Christmas yet to come, you know how it has the blank face? It's just tariffs. And then the picture it's pointing at the thing and it just says tabletop games. And it just has it at the gravestone. That's what I want. No, it's not a good one.
One change. One change to that. Okay. The gravestone is in the shape of a meeple.
Oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, great. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, man, that's 100%.
Okay, hold on. I have to look up Muppets Christmas Carol Ghost of Christmas Future?
Yet to come. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Big cloak, scary look.
Darker than I remember.
Oh yeah, no, Muppets.
Right?
Muppets Christmas Carol. Okay, a reminder: A Christmas Carol is like barely a story that's appropriate for kids, and in my opinion, and the opinion of many others who have excellent taste, A Muppets Christmas Carol is the authoritative on-screen version of A Christmas Carol. Like, there just aren't any others,
just
right?
Objectively true.
Right, yeah, okay, great, awesome. So
okay, I have a picture. Yeah, let me see what I can do on this.
Yeah,
that's
excellent.
a challenge.
Yeah, it is. This is the point where we're going to say goodbye to Janet. A reminder, Matt and I are going to be playing Oblivion here in a little bit on the Twitch channel. So if you'd like to join us for that, come on over. Otherwise, we will see you all, Janet, Monday for breakfast. Matt and I are going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about how poorly the Switch 2 pre-orders went. Not in so much as we're going to talk about the Switch 2, but we're talking about why pre-ordering games in the US sucks. That's a whole problem. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. So please join us for breakfast on Monday. Everybody say bye, Janet.
Bye.